Hey guys, it's Mike and Juanito from BorrowLenses.com. And today, we're going to take you guys behind the scenes of our most recent shoot. We want to take the time to talk to you guys about how we've been adapting on set while continuing to safely shoot content.
This time, we wanted to try something a little bit more practical. So we ended up landing on a spec shoot for BorrowLenses. For those of you who don't know what a spec shoot is, it's typically when you shoot something to try to grab the attention of a brand for them to hire you to shoot imagery for their company.
Now in this case, we are the brand. We thought this would be a good way to give you a genuine look at behind the scenes and talk about some of the issues that we encountered.
All right, that's enough of us talking. Here's our spec shoot for BorrowLenses. Just a couple things to get out of the way before we get started. We shot all this in the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K simply because it was the camera that we had. We also knew we were going to want to shoot a lot of this at 120 frames a second, so for us to maintain the camera's internal crop, we wanted to motivate all of that with a lot of motion in each shot.
We also shot in Blackmagic RAW because we knew it could handle the capacity of the footage and we wanted as much color space as possible. We 3D printed the logo in different sizes so it matched up to the gear with different focal lengths. So we put it together in the edit, it cut together well.
And before we even started shooting, we took those different sized logos and shot them at different focal lengths so we could take some reference images on our phones. So later on when we were framing everything up, we had something very similar that we could match it up to. We knew we'd have a little bit of wiggle room in post to move the BL logo where we needed it, but we wanted to make sure everything was lined up right from the get-go, just so we had an easier time and made sure everything cut together smoothly. But other than that, let's get into the setups.
So for the intro, we knew we wanted a reveal shot of the logo. So we had two quasar tubes of the same color temperature. Juanito held one behind the logo, and I held one above the logo, and we moved them simultaneously.
Besides timing both of our moves with the quasar tubes, it really wasn't that complicated of a setup. We just had the BL logo on top of an apple box with a black cloth over it, and other than that, we just went for it. Definitely out of all the setups, the most simplest, but don't worry, there's more to come. We knew we wanted the movement in the shot to be the light itself, and we thought that a classic setup to do that with would be setting up some Venetian blinds and getting it really close to the subject to get those really hard lines. We ended up shooting this on a tabletop, and we had two gray squares of wood that we were using, and I ended up having a circular cheese board on hand that we ended up putting there to elevate the BL logo and really just kind of separate the color palettes from the wood. We also knew that we definitely wanted to shoot this one top down to really maximize the effect of the Venetian blinds.
So what we did is we had a soft fill on camera right, and then we had our key light blasting through Venetian blinds. Our key light was an Aperture 300D with a reflector. We waved it up and down and side to side through Venetian blinds until it casted the shadows over the BL logo that we were happy with. For this one, we knew we wanted to use a projector. We wanted to backlight the logo in the Sony gear. Luckily enough, I have one, and I brought it over.
We thought it would be really cool to have some smoke in the background to really catch the light coming from the projector. Unfortunately, we went into this knowing we didn't really have a smoke machine. And while I don't recommend it, what I ended up doing was laying down on the ground of the garage, and with a vape that I had on handy, just started blowing smoke into the frame to see how everything would look out. And honestly, if it didn't work on that first take, we probably would have just scrapped the smoke idea in general and just tried to figure something different out.
In the end, we don't love this shot. The original framing was supposed to show the top of the projector and more of the Sony logos. Unfortunately, we had to crop it in so that it matched in the final cut.
Yeah, if we had the chance or the opportunity to, we would definitely go back and probably try to tidy this one up a bit, just to make sure that you were able to see everything that we initially wanted you to see when we shot it. So for this shot, we knew we wanted some color. We thought having some flowers in the frame would be really nice against all the technology we were already looking at. people already go out to actively shoot flowers, and they tend to look good even when they're bad flowers. Originally, we wanted to try to splatter some water onto the flowers, but after taking into account our setup and all the other shots we were going to do with water in it, we decided to try something different and toss some flower petals over the logo just to see how it would look. And we hated it. It just wasn't consistent enough for what we were doing. As we were trying to figure out what to do, a gust of wind came by and we liked the way the flowers moved by it. So we went to the next obvious choice and picked up a leaf blower to blow the wind to make the flowers move the way we wanted.
So for this setup, we only used the sun for lighting. We used a 4x4 scrim jim to diffuse the light onto the flowers. We then used a bounce card to add some light under the logo and onto the flowers to give it some fill. So what we did is we took a pigeon plate and we put it on the grass. And then we put the logo on top of the pigeon plate. We then circled around the logo with some flowers to try to block out the pigeon plate and the dead grass. And in the end, with the leaf blower and all, we really liked the shot.
Yeah, it turned out pretty well.
We wanted to experiment with bokeh on this one, but we knew we wouldn't be able to do it without seeing the wire from the Christmas lights, so we kind of had the set dress the best that we could. What we did is we took a quasar tube and we matched the color temperature from the Christmas lights to the tube, and we mounted it behind the logo and the gear. We did this to emulate the light from the Christmas lights shining onto the gear.
We also hid a small LED panel behind the BL logo to add some light onto the cameras, but also to add to the overall ambience in the room. Then, to top it off with the movement, with a 300D and the Fresnel attachment, we passed the light by the logo multiple times at multiple speeds until we landed on a take that we enjoyed. If we were to go back and do this again though, we'd probably try to address all the negative space at the bottom of the frame. Boy oh boy, this one's a lot to cover. This setup actually took us an entire day to shoot just because there were so many moving parts to it all. First of all, we knew to get started, we were gonna have to get set up as close to the outside as possible because we knew we were just gonna have to move a lot of water. But we also thought that since we were shooting it in the water, we thought it would be a good idea to have some action cameras fall through to really just kind of add to the motion of everything. So we really just needed to get our hands on a 10-gallon tank, and luckily, Mike here owns fish, so he also owned a water pump that we were able to quickly reset the water in the tank when we needed to. Because if you didn't know, 10 gallons is a lot of water.
So again, for this setup, we use a Sigma 50-100 f2, and the framing is literally the edges of the tank. We knew that we wanted to have a white backdrop, so what we did is we measured the tank and we cut sheets of diffusion and just taped it to the back of the tank. We took an Aperture 300D for the Fresnel attachment and blasted through the back of the tank for a backlight. We then took an Aperture 120D with a reflector and shined it through the front of the tank to evenly distribute the light.
Once we got the 3D print into the water, we noticed that it floated. So we ended up having to drill a bunch of holes into the back of the model so that way it could sink into the tank. We ended up getting a stack of magnets that I had on hand, but they looked really beaten up and ugly, so we ended up taking some rolls of diffusion, cutting them up, and rolling them around the stack of magnets to then put into the frame. And once we put it in and put a magnet into the logo, it held together and everything just stuck in place. We tried multiple different color combinations of ink to see which one would look the best. And at the end of it all, I think we ended up going through 8 to 10 different color combinations before we ended up landing on something that we liked.
Because our setup was easily resettable, we like to think that we put ourselves in a position to get pretty lucky. We love the way that the cameras dropped through the water and didn't rotate as the ink wraps around the BL logo. Now some will say that you guys got lucky, and we'll say that we got pretty lucky. So for this shot, we actually shot in a Canon 5D Mark IV. We want to utilize the internal time-lapse function. So what we did is we took 2 LED panels and we gelled one of them red and one of them blue. So the final shot is 375 photos at a 1.8 second exposure with 1 second interval between each shots so that the light streaks are always continuous.
We ended up taking 3 shots that we were really happy with and ended up layering them on top of each other for what you ended up seeing as the final shot. While we were going through and experimenting with different colors of gels and different sized LED panels, we didn't really like the light streaks we were getting from them or the colors that we were getting from them, so we decided to land on red and blue. I won't lie, I was pretty skeptical. I did not think that this shot would cut together with the rest of all the other footage that we shot, but it was really nice to combine Mike's experience with long exposure photography and my experience with visual effects to really get something that we think is really fitting for this piece. We knew for this shot, just like the Venetian blind shot, that we wanted to look top down to really maximize the effect of the ripples we were going to be making in the tank. At first, we had the tank set up a little bit too high on top of the table, so we knew we had to put it down on the ground for framing on top of a pancake apple box. We filled the tank with just enough water to not completely submerge it, but also not enough that when we actually started dropping water in there, that it would start moving the logo around.
So we took the syringes that we had for the ink shot. Now what we did is we filled with water, held it about a foot above the logo, and dropped it around until it created that ripple effect. As for the color, we just took different sheets of paper and put it right under the tank. We experimented. We tried with yellow, pink, red, blue, but in the end, we decided that red fit the brand better. As for lighting, we took a 120D with a lantern and mounted it right above the tank. We then took a bounce card and put it on one side of the tank. On the opposite side, we took an Aperture 300D with a reflector and bounced light off of the bounce card onto the ripples to illuminate the ripples better to give us the desired effect. In the end, this shot came out exactly as we planned. So we knew we needed to do the shot at night to get the full effect of the sparklers. And in the end, we ended up using 57 sparklers to complete the shot. So what we did is we put the gear and the logo on glass bowls to elevate it out of the grass. For lighting, we took an Aperture 300D with a lantern and mounted it directly above the gear and the logo. We then took a quasar tube and matched the color temperature to the sparklers and mounted it behind the logo and the gear to emulate the sparkler light hitting the gear.
We had 8 normal-sized sparklers up front, and we also had a couple larger sparklers in the back just so we had different levels of sparklers going off. Originally, we tried to light part of the background with another 120D, but it just didn't look that great, so we just left it black and decided to just add more sparklers. We then had these morning glory sparklers, which halfway through burning start sending off sparks of light, and we knew we wanted to capture that. So we had it set up so I was lighting most of the sparklers in the back, while Mike was lighting most of the sparklers in the front, and then was focusing on going around back in front of the gear to light everything with the morning glories. We ended up using the Sigma 18-35, and we had the camera positioned on a pigeon plate on the ground, surrounded by sandbags to keep everything cozy and stable. And at the end of it all, this really ended up being, personally, our favorite shot. Since we had an intro shot, we thought to ourselves that we needed some sort of outro shot to lead us out of the rest of the video. And we thought to ourselves, since we have all of this equipment, why don't we show off the large selection that we have? And it turns out that that concept is totally on brand for the company that we're shooting for, so it worked out. The setup was pretty simple. Set up a white background void on a white table with some gear stacked up, hit it with some red lights, and we thought we'd be off to the races. The camera was on a Rhino slider with the 12mm Laowa lens, and the goal was to start the shot framed up and then slowly pull out to reveal the rest of the equipment and the rest of the BL logos. One of the issues that we ran into is that by the time we got into the 2 position of the slider, we noticed that the BL logo wasn't in the middle anymore. And we were able to rectify that by slowly tilting the camera down while the Rhino was sliding out. But when we ended up doing this setup in the garage, we didn't like it. And it just didn't look as good as we thought it could. And we thought it was way too separated from the rest of the brand, and we knew then that we definitely needed to find a new environment to shoot the gear in.
So we reached out to our company, and they allotted us time to get into the studio so we can get our final shot of the sequence. As for lighting, we kept it super studio basic. We had 2 softboxes hitting the gear and the logo, and we had 1 spotlight hitting the wall in the background. As for everything else, camera, lens, Rhino, everything was the exact same. We both agree that the end shot in the studio looks way better than the garage. Not just because we're in a garage shooting against a bedsheet, but because the studio is an established location for the brand already, and it's a great outro. All in all, we think this shot does its purpose. It brings the viewers back into a space that's already an established location for the brand. So, there's a brief overview how Juanito and I were able to pull off a low-budget spec shoot for BorrowLenses.com. Now we understand there are many different ways to pull off these shots. We hope by bringing you guys behind the scenes, and showing how we executed them can help you guys along the way.
If you guys have any questions for any of the setups that we did, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. We really want to try to use more practical shoots like this to bring you guys along for not just the process and setup, but to show you guys how we're all adapting on set as things pop up. But if you guys want to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe and visit us over at BorrowLenses.com. See you next time.